The city of Rome did not rush into the evening. It never had. Not in the days of emperors and gladiators, not in the centuries of painters and popes, and certainly not now, as the sun began its slow, graceful descent behind the terracotta rooftops and the ancient stone domes that defined the eternal skyline. The light did not change abruptly. It did not switch off like a lamp. Instead, it softened. It melted. It turned from gold to amber, from amber to rose, from rose to violet, and then, finally, to that most magical of all colors, the blue. The blue hour, that tender, whispered interval between the death of day and the birth of night, when the entire world seemed to be wrapped in a velvet cloak of indigo and cobalt, when the air itself appeared to thicken with some luminous, ethereal substance that made everything look as though it had been painted by a hand that understood sorrow and beauty in equal measure. It was a time that belonged to no one and to everyone, a time when the city exhaled, when the stones cooled, when the frantic energy of the Italian afternoon, the scooters buzzing like angry wasps, the tourists clustering like confused pigeons, the shopkeepers waving their hands and raising their voices in that magnificent, incomprehensible symphony of daily Roman life. All of it began to quiet, to settle, to drift downward like ash from a fire that had burned for hours, and was finally, gently, running out of fuel on a narrow street just off the Via dei Coronari, in a building that had stood for 400 years and had housed, in its long lifetime, a baker, a countess, a priest, and a painter of mediocre religious scenes. There was a small apartment on the 3rd floor. The apartment had green shutters on the outside and cool terracotta tiles on the floor inside, and the walls were thick, so wonderfully, magnificently thick, that when the windows were closed, the sounds of the city became something distant and dreamlike, as though Rome were a memory rather than a place, as though the scooters and the voices and the distant church bells were not happening now, but had happened long ago and were merely echoing through time. In this apartment, sitting in a wooden chair by the open window, was a woman named Alina. Alina was 63 years old. She had silver hair that she wore cut short, framing a face that still carried the architecture of great beauty, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, dark eyes that were, if one looked closely, the exact color of the Tiber River in winter, which is to say, a deep and complicated green-brown that changed depending on the light and the mood and the weather. She wore a simple linen dress the color of cream, and around her neck, on a thin gold chain, she wore a small cross that had belonged to her grandmother and her grandmother's grandmother before that. A chain of mothers and daughters stretching back into the Roman past like roots of an old olive tree. Alina was not doing anything. That was the important thing to understand. She was not reading, not watching television, not scrolling through her phone, not cooking, not cleaning, not writing a letter, not making a list, not planning tomorrow, not replaying yesterday. She was simply sitting, simply breathing, simply being present in the blue hour, letting it wash over her the way water washes over stone, gently, persistently, without urgency, without demand. She had learned to do this. It had taken her years, perhaps most of her life. There had been a time, a long time, stretching through her 20s and 30s, and well into her 40s, when Alina had been incapable of stillness. She had been a woman in motion, a woman of lists and schedules and obligations, a woman who woke before dawn and fell asleep after midnight and filled every hour between with doing. She had raised 2 children, Matteo and Lucia, mostly alone after her husband Marco had left when the children were small. She had worked first as a teacher, then as a school administrator, then as as the director of a cultural center near the Pantheon. She had volunteered. She had cared for her aging parents. She had attended every school play, every parent-teacher meeting, every birthday party, every graduation. She had done all of it with a fierce, driving energy that everyone around her admired, and no one around her understood, because Alina herself did not understand it. She did not know why she could not stop. She did not know why the silence frightened her. She did not know that she was running from something, because the thing she was running from was inside her. And how do you run from something that lives in your own chest? But then, and this was the part of the story that mattered, the part that Alina sometimes thought about on evenings like this. When the blue hour came and the world went soft, something had shifted. It had happened 11 years ago. Alina had been 52. Her father had died in the spring, quietly, in the same room where he had been born, in the apartment below this one. And Alina had been with him at the end, holding his hand, feeling the pulse in his wrist grow fainter and fainter, until it was like the ticking of a watch wrapped in cloth, muffled, distant, and then gone. And in the silence that followed, the enormous, cathedral-like silence that filled the room after the last breath, Alina had experienced something she had never experienced before. She had experienced the feeling of being completely, utterly, absolutely present, not thinking about the past, not worrying about the future, just there, in the room, with her father's body, with the evening light coming through the window, with the sound of someone's distant radio playing a song she almost recognized. She had been there, fully there, for perhaps 30 seconds. And in those 30 seconds, she had felt something that she could only describe years later as peace. Not happiness, not sadness, not relief, just peace. The simple, astonishing peace of being alive in a moment that would never come again. It had frightened her. it had also changed her. She could not explain how. She could not point to a decision or a turning point or a moment of revelation. It was more like a crack had appeared in a wall, and through the crack, light had come. And slowly, over months and years, the crack had widened and more light had come. And the wall of constant motion, of relentless doing, of terrified stillness, had begun very gradually to crumble. Now, 11 years later, Alina sat in her wooden chair by the window and watched the blue hour settle over Rome. And she was not afraid. Outside, the sky was a masterpiece. It was the kind of sky that made you understand why the Renaissance had happened here, why painters had come from all over the world to try to capture on canvas what the Roman sky did every single evening for free. The upper reaches of the atmosphere were a deep, rich ultramarine, the color of a Madonna's robe in a Raphael painting, while lower down, closer to the horizon, the blue was lighter, warmer, almost lavender, blending with the last traces of pink and orange that clung to the western sky like the memory of a blush. And between these two blues, the deep and the light, there was every possible variation, every subtle gradation, every impossible shade that existed in the space between blue and not blue, as though the sky were showing off, as though it were saying, "Look, look what I can do." And I do this every night, and you almost never notice. But Alina noticed. She noticed every night. That was part of what had changed. The dome of St. Peter's was visible from her window, rising in the distance like a great gray pearl resting on a bed of blue silk. In the blue hour, the dome lost its harshness, its imposing scale, its institutional grandeur, and became something else entirely, something intimate, almost tender, as though it were not a building at all but a living thing, a creature that had stood for 400 years watching the sun go down over Rome, and had learned over all those centuries the art of patience. The dome held the blue light the way a lake holds the sky, reflecting it, deepening it, making it more than it was. And around the dome, the smaller domes and cupolas of the Vatican spread out like a family gathered around an elder, each one catching the last light at a slightly different angle, creating a constellation of blues and grays and shadows that shifted and changed with every passing minute. Closer to Alina's window, the rooftops of her own neighborhood presented a more humble but no less beautiful spectacle. The terracotta tiles, which blazed orange in the midday sun, had gone the color of dried blood, then the color of wine, then the color of plum, and now, in the blue hour, they had turned almost purple, a deep, muted purple that made them look like the roof of a painting by Giorgio Morandi. That quiet master of muted tones and gentle arrangements. Between the rooftops, Alina could see the tops of trees, umbrella pines, stone pines, the iconic trees of Rome, with their strange, flat canopies like green clouds frozen in the sky. In the blue light, the pines went from green to dark green, to a green so dark it was almost black, and their silhouettes against the fading sky looked like Japanese ink paintings, like something meditative and ancient, like a haiku written in branches and needles. Below the rooftops, the street was coming alive in a different way than it had been alive during the day. The frantic afternoon energy was gone. In its place was something slower, something more deliberate, something almost ceremonial. The restaurants along the Via dei Coronari were setting up their outdoor tables, and the waiters moved with a choreographed grace that Alina had watched 1,000 times and never tired of the unfolding of the white tablecloths, snapped once in the air so they billowed, and then settled flat against the tables like small sails catching an invisible wind, the arranging of the chairs, each one positioned at exactly the right angle, not too close to its neighbor, not too far. The placing of the small vases with their single flowers, always a single flower, a rose or a ranunculus or a white dahlia. At the center of each table, like a tiny offering, a small gift from the restaurant to the evening. The street lights had not yet come on. They would come on soon. There was always that exquisite moment, usually about 15 minutes into the blue hour, when the first street light flickered to life, followed by another, and then another, like a chain of small domestic stars being born along the ancient streets. But for now, the light came only from the sky and from the windows of the apartments, where people were moving behind the glass like shadows in a lantern, going about the quiet rituals of evening, drawing curtains, lighting candles, setting pots on stoves, gathering around tables. Elena watched all of this with the gentle attention of someone who understood that watching was not a passive act, but an active one, a form of participation, a way of saying to the world, I see you. I am here. You are not alone. A breeze came through the window, and with it came the smells of the Roman evening, which were, in the blue hour, different from the smells of the Roman day. The day smelled of coffee and exhaust, and hot stone, and garbage and perfume, and the faint, ever-present scent of the Tiber, which was not entirely pleasant, but was entirely Roman, as much a part of the city's identity as the Colosseum or the Vatican. But the evening smelled of other things. The breeze carried the scent of jasmine from a window box 2 floors below. A generous, almost shameless jasmine that poured its fragrance into the street as though it had been asked to perfume the entire neighborhood, and had taken the assignment seriously. Beneath the jasmine was the smell of garlic and olive oil from one of the restaurants, a smell so warm and so fundamental that it seemed to belong not to a particular kitchen, but to the city itself, as though Rome exhaled garlic and olive oil the way a person exhales breath. And beneath that, faint but unmistakable, was the smell of night-blooming flowers. Alina was never sure which ones. There were so many in Rome. The jasmine and the honeysuckle and the moonflowers and the nicotiana, all of them opening at this hour, all of them releasing their perfumes into the cooling air like small, secret prayers. Alina breathed in deeply. The air was cool now, deliciously cool, a relief after the heat of the day, which had been considerable even for June. The kind of heat that made the marble steps of the churches warm to the touch and turned the inside of the Pantheon into an oven and made the tourists walk in that slow, defeated way that Romans recognized immediately and pitied secretly. But now the heat was retreating, drawing back from the stones and the streets and the air like a tide going out. And in its place was this coolness, this blessed, gentle coolness that felt like water on the skin, like a kind touch on a tired face. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang. Not urgently. Roman church bells never rang urgently in the evening, but slowly, deliberately, with a sonority that seemed to come not from the bell itself, but from the earth, as though the ground were vibrating, and the sound were rising up through the stones of the city, through the ancient foundations and the buried ruins and the layers of history that lay beneath every street and every building, layers that went down and down and down, past the Renaissance, past the Middle Ages, past the fall of Rome, past the Republic, past the kings, all the way down to the mud and reeds of the original marshland, the primeval swamp that had existed before there was a Rome at all, before there was a name for this place, before there was anything here except water and earth and sky and silence. The bell rang 6 times. 6 o'clock. or perhaps 7, Alina never kept close track of time during the blue hour, because keeping track of time was exactly the kind of thing that the blue hour was designed to dissolve. Time in the blue hour became elastic, uncertain, dreamlike. Minutes stretched, hours compressed. The boundary between now and then, between here and there, between what was real and what was remembered, became porous and permeable, like the boundary between waking and sleep. And Alina understood, not with her mind, but with her body, with her breath, with the rhythm of her heartbeat, that this porousness was a gift, that the blue hour was a doorway, and that if you sat quietly enough, if you breathed slowly enough, if you let go of enough, you could step through that doorway into a different kind of time, a time that was not measured in minutes and hours, but in sensations and feelings, in the quality of light on stone, in the fading of a color, in the slow, imperceptible movement of a shadow across a wall. She closed her eyes. Behind her closed eyelids, the blue remained. It was there, imprinted on her vision like a photographic negative, a blue that was not the blue of the sky, but the blue of her own body's response to the sky, the blue of her retinas processing the last light of day, the blue of her mind quieting down, the blue of her thoughts, which had been circling and chattering and buzzing all day like the scooters in the street. Finally beginning to slow, to separate, to drift apart like clouds that have been pressed together all afternoon and are now, in the cooling evening air, beginning to loosen, to thin, to reveal patches of sky between them. She let out a breath. She let in a breath. She let out a breath. She let in a breath. Simple, ordinary. The same breathing she had done every moment of every day of her 63 years of life. But now, in the blue hour, in the chair by the window, with the sounds of Rome coming to her like music from another room, the breathing felt different. It felt deliberate. It felt chosen. It felt like the most important thing she could possibly be doing. This letting out and letting in, this giving away and receiving, this constant rhythmic conversation between her body and the world. When she opened her eyes again, the blue had deepened. The ultramarine of the upper sky had gone almost black, and the lavender of the lower sky had darkened to a rich, deep blue violet that reminded Elena of the glass of a wine bottle held up to a candle. The dome of St. Peter's was now a silhouette, a magnificent, imposing silhouette, but a silhouette nonetheless, stripped of its detail, reduced to its essential shape, which was, Elena thought, the shape of a thought bubble, the shape of an idea rising, the shape of something trying to lift itself above the ordinary world and touch something higher. The streetlights had begun to come on. She had missed the first one. She always missed the first one, no matter how carefully she watched. But now they were blooming along the street below in a chain of warm amber light, each one casting a small pool of gold on the cobblestones, and the contrast between the warm gold of the streetlights and the cool blue of the sky was so beautiful, so impossibly beautiful, that Elena felt something tighten in her chest, a small, sweet ache that was not quite joy and not quite sadness, but was, perhaps, the place where joy and sadness met and acknowledged each other, the way old friends meet on a street and stop and simply look at each other for a moment, saying nothing, needing to say nothing, because everything that needed to be said was contained in the looking. A cat appeared on the rooftop opposite Elena's window. It was a large orange cat, a Roman cat, which meant it was not exactly a stray and not exactly a pet, but something in between, a creature that belonged to the city itself, that answered to no one, that came and went as it pleased, that was fed by a dozen different households and ignored by none. The cat moved along the ridge of the rooftop with the casual confidence of an animal that knew it was on its own territory, pausing occasionally to look down at the street below, its ears rotating like small satellite dishes, picking up sounds that Alina, with her human ears, could not hear. In the blue light, the cat's orange fur had gone the color of a sunset that had been diluted with water. A pale, muted amber that seemed to glow faintly, as though the cat were not merely reflecting the light, but generating its own. The cat settled on a chimney pot. The chimney pots on Roman rooftops were like small towers, like miniature campaniles, and cats loved them, perching on top of them like sentinels, like guardians of the rooftops, and curled its tail around its paws and looked out over the city with an expression of such profound, such absolute calm that Alina found herself holding her breath. The cat was not doing anything. The cat was not chasing anything, not eating anything, not calling to anyone. The cat was simply sitting, simply being, simply present in the blue hour, the way Alina was present in the blue hour. And for a moment, a brief, luminous moment, Alina felt a connection to the cat that transcended the usual boundaries between species. A connection based not on understanding, but on shared presence, on the simple fact that both of them, the woman and the cat, were here, in this place, at this time, doing nothing, needing nothing, wanting nothing, and that this nothing, this stillness, this quiet was enough. The cat blinked slowly. Alina blinked slowly. The cat looked away. Alina looked away. And the moment passed, as moments always do, but it left behind it a residue of warmth, like the warmth that remains on a chair after someone has stood up from it. Below the cat, on the street, a couple walked past. They were young, early 20s, perhaps, and they were holding hands, and they were walking slowly, the way people walk when they do not want to arrive at their destination, when the walk itself is the point, when the movement through the beautiful evening is the thing they want to savor, not the thing they want to end. The woman had dark hair that fell past her shoulders, and the man was tall and stooped slightly, leaning toward her as though he were a plant and she were the sun. They were talking, but their voices were low, intimate, meant for each other and no one else. And from Alina's window, 3 stories up, their words were just sounds, rhythmic, melodic sounds, the sounds of Italians spoken softly, which was, Alina had always thought, one of the most beautiful sounds in the world, a sound like water over smooth stones, like wind through leaves, like something natural and unforced and inevitable. The couple paused beneath one of the newly lit street lights, and the light fell on them and turned them golden. And they stood there for a moment, framed in the golden pool, and the man lifted the woman's hand to his lips and kissed it. A simple gesture, an old-fashioned gesture, a gesture that might have been ridiculous in another context, but that here, in the blue hour, on this street, beneath this light, was perfect, was exactly right, was the gesture that the moment required. Alina watched them. She did not feel envy. She did not feel nostalgia for her own youth, for the time when she and Marco had walked like that through Roman streets, before the children, before the leaving, before the years of solitary striving. She felt something else. She felt gratitude, not for the couple specifically. She did not know them, but for the existence of such moments, for the fact that the world contained young couples who kissed each other's hands beneath streetlights, for the fact that the blue hour could make even the most ordinary romance look like a Caravaggio painting, all gold and shadow and dramatic beauty. She was grateful that such things still happened, that the world had not become too cynical or too fast or too distracted for such simple, such ancient, such irreducible acts of love. The couple moved on. Their golden pool swallowed them up and spat them out on the other side. and they walked away down the Via dei Coronari, growing smaller and smaller. And then they turned a corner and were gone. Alina sat with the absence they left behind. The street felt empty for a moment, but it was not an unpleasant emptiness. It was the emptiness of a theater between acts, of a church between services, of a pause in a piece of music that is not a rest, but a breathing space, a moment of silence that gives meaning to the sounds that come before and after. From somewhere, she could not tell exactly where, came the sound of a piano. It was a gentle sound, a tentative sound, the sound of someone who was not performing, but was perhaps practicing, or perhaps just playing, not for an audience, but for themselves, for the pleasure of their own fingers on the keys, for the pleasure of the notes as they hung in the air, and then faded, one by one, like soap bubbles. The piece was something Alina did not recognize, not Debussy, not Sadie, not any of the usual composers who were played during the Blue Hour by people who wanted to create a mood. It was something simpler, something more personal, a melody that seemed to be discovering itself as it went along, feeling its way forward note by note, chord by chord, like a person walking through a dark room with their hands outstretched, not afraid of the dark, but simply careful, gentle, respectful of the unknown. The piano music mixed with the sounds of the street, the distant murmur of voices from the restaurants, the clink of glasses and silverware, the low rumble of a car passing on a nearby street, the intermittent barking of a dog who seemed to be having a conversation with another dog several blocks away. And the mixture was not chaotic, but harmonious, a kind of accidental symphony that the city composed every evening without knowing it, a symphony that had no conductor and no score and no audience except those who, like Alina, were sitting quietly enough to hear it. She leaned back in her chair. The wood creaked softly beneath her. A small, domestic sound that she found oddly comforting, as though the chair were speaking to her, saying, "I am here. I am holding you. You can relax." And she did relax. She felt her shoulders drop, felt the tension that she always carried in her shoulders, a tension so habitual, so old, so much a part of her that she had stopped noticing it years ago, begin very slightly to loosen. She felt her jaw unclench. She felt her hands, which had been resting on the arms of the chair, open slightly, the fingers unfurling like small leaves uncurling in the morning. She felt her belly soften. She felt her breathing slow. This was what the blue hour did. This was its gift. It did not give her anything she did not already have. It did not add anything to her life. It simply removed things, removed tension, removed noise, removed the constant, low-grade anxiety that hummed beneath the surface of every day like an electrical current. It stripped away the unnecessary, the extraneous, the superfluous, and left behind only what was essential. The body in the chair, the breath in the lungs, the eyes looking out at the world, the ears listening to the sounds, the skin feeling the cool air, the mind doing nothing more than being aware of all of this, which was, when you thought about it, which Alina almost never did because thinking about it ruined it, a kind of miracle. The blue hour was deepening. The sky was no longer blue, not really. It was the color that existed on the very edge of blue, the color that blue became just before it turned into black, a color so deep and so dark that it seemed to have weight, to have substance, to be not a color at all, but a presence, a being, something that had come into the world specifically to wrap itself around the city and hold it gently, firmly, the way you hold a sleeping child, the way you hold something precious and fragile and irreplaceable. The first stars were appearing. Not many. Rome was too bright, too lit up, too full of street lights and window lights, and the ambient glow of 1,000,000 modern lives to show many stars, but a few, the brightest ones, the ones that were strong enough or stubborn enough to shine through the light pollution and announce themselves to anyone who cared to look up. Elena looked up. There was one star, high above St. Peter's dome, that was particularly bright, and she stared at it for a long time, letting her eyes adjust, letting the star become more than a point of light, letting it become a presence, a companion, a small, steady flame burning in the immensity of the darkening sky. She thought briefly of her children. Matteo was in Milan working for a technology company, living in a modern apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of skyscrapers. And he was happy, she believed, or at least she believed he was happy, which might or might not be the same thing. Lucia was in Barcelona, studying marine biology, living near the sea, sending Elena photographs of jellyfish and starfish. And once, memorably, a sea turtle that she had helped rescue from a fishing net. Elena missed them. She missed them in a way that was not sharp, but dull, not acute, but chronic, a kind of background ache that was always there, like the hum of a refrigerator, and that she had learned to live with, the way you learn to live with any persistent, low-level sensation, not ignoring it, but not dwelling on it either, simply acknowledging it from time to time, and then letting it be. She did not reach for her phone. She did not consider calling them. The blue hour was not a time for reaching out. It was a time for reaching in, for going deeper into oneself, into the quiet interior space where the noise of the day could not follow, where the obligations and the worries and the to-do lists could not penetrate, where there was nothing but the self and the breath and the fading light and the slowly appearing stars. The piano music had stopped. In its absence, the sounds of the street seemed to swell slightly, as though the silence left by the piano had created a vacuum that the other sounds rushed to fill. But then the sounds settled again, level found their balance, and the street's symphony continued without its piano part, which was fine, which was more than fine, because the street's symphony did not need a piano. It needed only what it had: the voices, the clinking, the car, the dog, the breeze, the stone, the light. It needed only the city being itself, which was, when you stripped away the guidebooks and the postcards and the Instagram feeds and the tourist buses and all the layers of expectation and projection that had accumulated over 2,000 years. A collection of buildings and streets and people and animals and plants and sounds and smells and light and shadow that was, at this particular moment in the blue hour, in this particular place, perfect. Alina's eyes were heavy now, not with sleep, not yet, but with something that was the precursor to sleep, something that was not sleep itself, but was sleep's cousin, sleep's herald, sleep's gentle advance guard that came first to soften the mind and loosen the body's grip on wakefulness before sleep itself arrived in its full, enveloping majesty. Her eyelids drooped. She let them droop. She did not fight it. She had learned over these past 11 years that fighting was the enemy of peace, that the moment you began to resist the heaviness, resist the stillness, resist the quiet, was the moment you lost it, the moment you were pulled back into the world of doing and striving and running. And she did not want to be pulled back. She wanted to stay here, in this place between waking and sleep, this blue place, this place where the body was still and the mind was quiet and the world was beautiful, and nothing needed to be done and nothing needed to be said, and nothing needed to be anything other than exactly what it was. A bird called. A night bird, she did not know which kind. There were several species of night birds in Rome, and she had never learned to distinguish their calls, had never felt the need to, because not knowing the name of a bird did not prevent her from hearing its song, from being moved by it, from feeling the thin, reedy note thread its way through the blue darkness like a needle pulling a thread of sound through the fabric of the evening. The bird called again, and then again, and then it was silent, and its silence was as beautiful as its song, because the silence was not empty, but full, full of the echo of the song, full of the anticipation of the next song, full of the vast, breathing presence of the night itself, which was not the absence of day, but the presence of something else entirely, something that had its own texture, its own temperature, its own rhythm, its own way of being in the world. Alina's breathing had become very slow, very deep. Each breath was a journey in through the nose, down into the belly, filling her from the bottom up like a vessel being filled with water, and then out through the mouth, slowly, slowly, the breath leaving her like a sigh, like a gift given freely, like a small, warm cloud of air that rose from her lips and dissipated into the blue darkness of the room. The room was dark now. The blue hour was ending. The transition was almost complete. The sky outside was no longer blue, but black. A black that was not pure, it never was in Rome, but was threaded with the amber glow of the city, a warm, low glow that sat on the horizon like a blanket of embers, the last remaining heat of the day's fire. The street lights were fully on now, and the restaurants were in full swing, and the sounds of dinner, laughter, conversation, the clatter of plates, the pouring of wine, rose up from the street like the steam from a pot, warm and fragrant and full of life. But Alina did not engage with any of it. She was no longer watching. She was no longer listening, not in the active, deliberate way she had been listening before. She had crossed a threshold, so gently, so gradually that she had not noticed the crossing, and was now in a different state, a state that was not quite waking and not quite sleeping, but was was somewhere in between, a state that the French called l'entre-deux, the between two, and that Alina thought of in her own private vocabulary as the blue place, because it was the color of the blue hour made internal, the blue of the sky transferred to the blue of the mind, the blue of the world outside becoming the blue of the world inside. In this blue place, thoughts still came, but they came differently. They did not come in sentences. They did not come in sequences. They came as images, as sensations, as fragments of memory that floated up from somewhere deep and drifted across the surface of her consciousness like leaves on a pond. She saw her father's hands, large, strong, stained with ink from the newspapers he read every morning. She saw the jasmine on the balcony of her childhood home, the way it climbed the trellis and filled the summer nights with its scent. She saw the sea at Santa Marinella, where her family had gone for August holidays when she was a girl. The water a blue that was different from the blue of the sky, but related to it. A blue that was deeper and wetter and more alive. A blue that moved. She saw Marco, not the Marco who left, not the Marco of the ending, but the Marco of the beginning. The young Marco who had sat across from her at a cafe near Piazza Navona and had said, with a seriousness that was both absurd and completely sincere, "I think I am going to fall in love with you." And she had laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was true. She could see it happening even as he said it, could see the falling beginning, could see herself beginning to fall too. And the laughter was the sound of that falling, the sound of two people letting go of the ground beneath them. These images came and went. They did not stay. They did not demand attention. They were like the clouds that passed over the city during the day. There one moment, gone the next, leaving behind a sky that was, in their absence, somehow clearer, somehow more itself. Alina's body was very heavy now. Her hands lay in her lap, open and loose, like flowers that had been picked and set down, and were no longer expected to do anything except be. Her feet were flat on the cool terracotta floor, and she could feel the floor through the thin soles of her slippers, could feel its solidity, its stability, its 400-year-old refusal to move, to shift, to be anything other than exactly what it was, a floor, holding up a building, holding up a woman in a chair, doing its job without complaint, without recognition, without applause. She thought in a fragmentary, half-dreaming way about floors, about all the floors she had walked on in her life, the marble floors of churches, worn smooth by centuries of feet, the wooden floors of her parents' apartment, which creaked in specific places and in specific ways, each creak a word in a language that only the family understood. The tile floors of the school where she had taught, cold and hard and echoing with the sounds of children. The cobblestone streets of Rome, which were not floors exactly, but were the city's floor, the ground that everyone walked on, the ancient, uneven, treacherous ground that twisted ankles and broke heels, and had been walked on by Caesars and popes and artists and ordinary people for 2,500 years, and which bore the marks of all those feet, was shaped by all those feet, was, in a sense, a record of all those lives, a palimpsest of human passage written in stone. But the thought dissolved. The blue place did not hold thoughts for long. It let them pass through the way a net lets water pass through, catching nothing, holding nothing, simply allowing the flow. The city outside was settling into its night rhythm. The sounds had changed again. The dinner sounds were still there, but they were quieter now, more diffuse, as though the restaurants had entered a later, more relaxed phase of the evening, the phase where the first courses had been eaten and the second courses were being savored, and the conversation had gone from loud to soft, from public to private, from the performance of sociability to the genuine experience of connection. The scooters were fewer. The tourists had retreated to their hotels and their Airbnbs and their restaurants, and the streets belonged once again to the Romans, who moved through the night with the ease and confidence of people who belonged where they were, who knew these streets the way you know the rooms of your own house, who could navigate them in the dark, in the noise, in the rain, in their sleep. A group of young people walked past below, laughing. Their laughter was bright and sharp, and it cut through the evening air like a knife. But it was not an unpleasant cutting. It was the cutting of something fresh, something young, something that had not yet learned to be careful with its joy. Elena heard the laughter and felt it pass through her like a warm wind, and she smiled, not with her mouth, but with something deeper, with the part of her that remembered being young, that remembered laughing like that understood that laughter was, among all the sounds that humans made, perhaps the most honest, the most irreducible, the one that could not be faked or forced or used to deceive, the one that was always, always, always real. The laughter faded. The street returned to its murmur. The blue hour was over now, officially, technically, astronomically over. The sun was below the horizon. The sky was black. The stars, the few that Rome allowed to be seen, were out. The night had begun, but Elena carried the blue hour with her. It was inside her now, in the blue place behind her closed eyes, in the blue stillness of her body, in the blue slow rhythm of her breathing. The blue hour was not a time that happened to the sky. It was a time that happened to the soul. It was a time of transition, of transformation, of the gentle, gradual movement from one state to another. And that movement, that slow, patient, unhurried movement, was something that could be learned, could be practiced, could be carried with you even after the sky had gone black and the stars had come out, and the world had moved on to its next thing. Alina was asleep now, truly asleep, not in the blue place anymore, but in the deeper place, the dark place, the place where dreams lived. She had crossed the second threshold, the one from the between into the beyond, and she had crossed it the way she crossed everything these days, slowly, gently, without resistance, without fear, trusting that whatever was on the other side would be exactly what it was supposed to be. Her head had tilted to one side, resting against the back of the wooden chair. Her mouth was slightly open. Her breathing was deep and even, and made a small, soft sound, not a snore, not exactly, but something close, something that was to snoring what a whisper is to shouting, a gentle, rhythmic exhalation that was almost musical, almost a melody, almost a lullaby that she was singing to herself in the language of sleep. The chair held her. The room held her. The building held her. The street held her. The city held her. And the night, the vast, dark, star-threaded, amber-glowing, jasmine-scented Roman night held her too, wrapped its arms around her the way the blue hour had wrapped its blue around the sky, and held her gently, and held her safely, and let her sleep. Outside, the world continued. The restaurants served their desserts. The couples walked their slow walks. The cats patrolled their rooftop territories. The church bells marked the hours in their patient, unhurried way. The Tiber flowed through the city as it always had, as it always would, carrying the water of mountains and rain and history toward the sea. And the stone, the ancient, enduring, patient stone of Rome, cooled in the night air and held the warmth it had gathered during the day, and released it slowly, slowly, like a secret being told very quietly, like a song being sung very softly, like a story being told to someone who is falling asleep, someone who does not need to hear the ending because the telling itself is enough. The voice itself is enough. The presence itself is enough. The simple, miraculous, irreplaceable fact of being here, in this place, in this moment, alive, breathing, held safe, at peace. The blue hour would come again tomorrow. It came every day. It had come every day for as long as there had been a Rome, and it would come every day for as long as there was a sky to turn blue and a city to turn that blue into something more than a color, into a feeling, into a story, into a prayer that did not ask for anything and did not promise anything, but simply said, in the language of light and silence and stillness, rest now. The day is done. The night is here. You have done enough. You are enough. Rest. And Alina rested, and the city rested around her, and the night rested over them both, and the blue, the last blue, the fatting blue, the blue that existed now only in memory, and in the space behind closed eyes. The blue held them all, the way it always did, the way it always would, the way it had been holding Rome and its people, and its stones, and its trees, and its cats, and its birds, and its rivers, and its dreams for 2,000 years and more. In the quiet hours between the day and the dark, in the sacred, tender, luminous, unforgettable blue hour. And so the night settles, and so the city sleeps, and so the blue hour passes as it always does, leaving behind not sadness but stillness, not loss but peace. Close your eyes now. Let the blue come. Let it fill you the way it fills the Roman sky, slowly, gently, completely. You are here. You are held. You are safe. The story is over. The sleep is beginning. Rest. Rest. A crescent moon. The night deepened, and with it, the city performed its most ancient and most faithful ritual, the ritual of settling. Not the settling of dust, or the settling of arguments, or the settling of debts, but the settling of a living organism into repose, the way a great bird settles onto its nest, folding its wings, adjusting its weight, finding the exact position in which rest becomes possible. Rome settled street by street, neighborhood by neighborhood, the way a wave settles on a shore, not all at once, but in sections, in layers, the outer edges going quiet first, and the center holding onto wakefulness a little longer. The way the heart holds onto its last beat before sleep takes over. In Trastevere, across the river, the settling was slower. Trastevere was the city's night soul, its nocturnal self, the part of Rome that came alive only after the rest of Rome had begun to drowse. The restaurants there were still loud, still bright, still spilling their light and their music and their laughter onto the cobblestones in great golden puddles that looked, from a distance, like pools of liquid amber. The piazzas were full. The bars were full. The narrow, winding streets that had been quiet all day were now thronged with people, young people mostly, students and travelers and locals in their 20s and 30s, who had not yet learned the art of the blue hour, who did not yet understand that the most beautiful part of the evening was not the loud part, but the quiet part, not the part where you shouted over music in a crowded bar, but the part where you sat by an open window and watched the sky turn blue and listened to the city whisper. But even Trastevere would settle. It always did. By 2 or 3 in the morning, even the most persistent of the night revelers would have gone home, or gone to sleep, or gone to the next place. And the streets of Trastevere would be given back to the cats, and the stone, and the occasional insomniac walking slowly, thoughtfully, through the empty corridors of the night city, feeling like the last person on earth, feeling in that aloneness a strange and paradoxical companionship with the city itself, which was also alone, also awake, also moving through the dark hours, with no one to witness it, except those who chose to be awake when the world was sleeping. But that was later. For now, at this moment, this precise, unrepeatable moment that existed between the end of the blue hour and the beginning of the deep night, Trastevere was still burning with its borrowed fire, across the river on Alina's side of the Tiber, the world had gone quiet, and the contrast between the two halves of the city was like the contrast between wakefulness and sleep itself, between the active mind and the resting body, between the surface of a river and its depths. Alina slept in her chair, the wooden chair that had been her father's chair, that had been his father's chair before that, that had been built, according to family legend, by a carpenter in the Via dei Sedari, who had used wood from a chestnut tree that had grown in the courtyard of the building where Alina now lived, a tree that had been cut down in 1923 to make room for a new wall, and whose wood had been salvaged by the carpenter and turned into this chair, this simple, sturdy, unremarkable chair that had held generations of tired bodies in its arms and had never once complained, had never once asked for anything in return, had never once failed to do the single thing it had been made to do, to hold. The chair held Alina now. It held her the way the earth holds a tree, not gripping, not grasping, but simply providing a place to be, a foundation, a ground. And Alina, in her sleep, trusted the chair completely, the way a tree trusts the earth, the way a child trusts a parent, the way a sleeper trusts the surface beneath them, which is to say, absolutely, unconditionally, without reservation, because to sleep is to surrender, and to surrender is to trust, and to trust is to be human in the deepest and most essential way. In her sleep, Alina dreamed. She did not dream of Rome, or rather, she did not dream of the Rome that existed outside her window, the Rome of restaurants and streetlights and tourists and scooters. She dreamed of a different Rome, an older Rome, a Rome that existed not in space, but in time, not in the present, but in the past, not in the waking world, but in the vast, mysterious, uncharted territory of memory and imagination, where the dreams of old women live. She dreamed of the Rome of her childhood. She was 7 years old. She was standing in the courtyard of the building where she had grown up. The building on the Via del Governo Vecchio, not far from where she lived now, just a few streets over, close enough that she could have walked there in 5 minutes, but far enough in the landscape of memory that it felt like another country, another world, another life. The courtyard was small and square and paved with the same kind of terracotta tiles that were in her apartment now. And in the center of the courtyard, there was a well, a real well, a working well, with a stone rim and an iron handle, and a bucket that went down into the darkness to fetch water that was cold and clean and tasted of minerals and earth and something else, something that Alina had never been able to name, but that she associated forever after with the taste of being young. In the dream, it was evening. Not the blue hour. She was too young in the dream to know about the blue hour, too young to understand its gifts. But the hour just before, the golden hour, when the sun was low and the light was warm and the shadows were long and everything looked as though it had been dipped in honey. Her mother was hanging laundry on a line that stretched across the courtyard from one window to another, and the sheets were white, and they billowed in the breeze, and they caught the golden light, and they looked to the 7-year-old Alina like the sails of a ship, like the sails of a ship that was about to set sail for some wonderful, mysterious, impossible destination. And she wanted to climb onto the sheets and be carried away by the wind to wherever the ship was going, which was anywhere, which was everywhere, which was all the places in the world that a 7-year-old girl from Rome had not yet seen, and could therefore imagine as perfectly, as boundlessly, as beautifully as only a child can. Her mother turned and saw her standing there and smiled. The smile was the kind of smile that exists only in dreams and memories. A smile that contains everything, that says everything, that communicates in a single curve of the lips all the love and the worry and the hope and the fear and the pride and the tenderness that a mother feels for her child. A smile that is, in its totality, a complete and perfect expression of what it means to love someone, and that cannot be replicated in waking life, because waking life is too fast and too cluttered and too full of other things for any single smile to carry that much weight. In the dream, Alina walked to her mother and buried her face in the damp laundry, and the smell of the laundry was the smell of clean, not the clean of chemicals and detergents, but the clean of sun and wind and water, the clean of the natural world doing what it does naturally, without help, without intervention, without anything except light and air, and the simple, miraculous process of evaporation. She breathed in the smell of clean and felt her mother's hand on her head, heavy and warm and gentle. And she felt, with the absolute certainty of childhood, that everything was okay, that everything would always be okay, that the world was a safe and good and beautiful place, and that she was loved and protected, and that nothing in all the wide and wonderful world could ever harm her. The dream shifted. It did not shift abruptly. Dreams rarely do, despite what people think. But gradually, the way the blue hour shifts to night, the way a conversation shifts from one topic to another through a series of small, almost imperceptible steps that only make sense in retrospect. The courtyard dissolved. The well dissolved. The laundry and the golden light and her mother's hand and the smell of clean, all of it dissolved, not into nothing, but into something else, into a new scene, a new moment, a new fragment of the past that rose up from the depths of Alina's sleeping mind, like a bubble rising from the bottom of a pond. She was 24 now. She was sitting on the Spanish Steps. It was late afternoon in autumn, October, perhaps. or November, and the light was the light of autumn in Rome, which was different from the light of any other season. The autumn light was thinner, more reserved, more contemplative, as though the sun, after the exuberance of summer, had decided to be more selective about where it shone, more deliberate about which surfaces it illuminated, more artistic in its choices. It fell on the stone steps in diagonal stripes, light and shadow alternating like the keys of a piano, and where it touched the stone, it warmed it, and where it did not touch the stone was cool, and the contrast between the warm and the cool was so precise, so elegant, that sitting on the steps felt like sitting inside a piece of music. Alina was alone. She had finished her teaching certification that morning. The last exam, the last paper, the last bureaucratic hurdle in a process that had taken 2 years and had drained her of energy and confidence, and at times of the will to continue. But she had finished. It was done, and she had come to the Spanish Steps because she did not know where else to go, because the emotion she was feeling, a mixture of relief and exhaustion and uncertainty, and a strange, fragile flicker of something that might have been pride, was too large and too complex and too unfamiliar to be contained in an apartment or a cafe or a classroom. And she needed a place that was big enough to hold it. And the Spanish Steps, with their grand sweep from the Piazza di Spagna up to the Trinità dei Monti, with their view of the rooftops and the domes and the sky, were big enough. She sat on one of the middle steps, not the bottom where the tourists clustered, and not the top where the church stood like a stern guardian, but in the middle, in the place where the steps widened into a kind of natural terrace, a resting place, a place designed, whether intentionally or not, for sitting and thinking and being. She wore a brown coat that she had bought at a market near Porta Portis for very little money, and that she loved more than any piece of clothing she had ever owned. because the coat was soft and warm and smelled faintly of the woman who had sold it to her. A smell of perfume and coffee and something else. Something that reminded Alina of her grandmother's house. And wearing the coat was like being wrapped in a memory, like being hugged by someone she could not quite see. She sat on the steps and she did nothing. She did not read. She did not people watch, at least not consciously. She did not plan. She did not remember. She did not anticipate. She simply sat. And as she sat, the feeling that had brought her here, the feeling that was too large, too complex, too unfamiliar, began very slowly to settle, to find its shape, to become something she could hold rather than something that was holding her. And what it became when it finally found its form was not pride and not relief and not uncertainty, but something simpler than all of those, something that she could only describe later, much later, as the feeling of having arrived. Not arrived at a destination. She was not going anywhere. Not arrived at an achievement. The teaching certification was just a piece of paper. Arrived at herself. Arrived for the first time that she could remember, at the place where she was simply and completely present in her own life, not running toward the future or away from the past, but here, on these steps, in this coat, in this light, in this body, in this moment. And the moment was enough. The moment was more than enough. The moment was everything. She had not known, sitting on those steps at 24, that she would spend the next 30 years forgetting what she had learned that afternoon. She had not known that the arrival she felt was not a permanent destination, but a place she would have to return to again and again and again. A place she would lose and find and lose and find, like a coin in a pocket, like a word on the tip of the tongue, like a star behind a cloud. She had not known that the blue hour, which she experienced that afternoon on the steps without knowing its name, without knowing that it was a thing that could be named, would become her teacher, her guide, her refuge, the place she would go again and again across the decades when the world became too loud and too fast and too much, and she needed to remember what she had known briefly and perfectly on those steps at 24, that she was here, that she was enough, that the moment was everything. The dream shifted again. Now she was 41. She was standing in the kitchen of the apartment where she had raised her children, the apartment on the second floor of a building on the Via di San Pantaleo. And she was stirring a pot of minestrone soup. The kitchen was small, ridiculously small, by any reasonable standard. A kitchen that could barely hold one person, and certainly could not hold two without an elaborate choreography of turning and sidestepping and apologizing. But it was Alina's kitchen, and she loved it the way you love a small boat if that boat has carried you safely through a storm, which this kitchen had many times in the years after Marco left, when the children were small and the money was tight and the days were long, and the only thing that stood between chaos and order was a pot of soup and a woman willing to stir it. It was evening, the blue hour. She could see it through the small window above the sink, that miraculous window that looked out not onto a street or a courtyard, but onto a wall, a blank, windowless, featureless wall that was, by any objective measure, the worst view in Rome, but that Alina loved because the wall caught the blue light of the evening sky and held it and reflected it and became, for 15 or 20 minutes every evening, the most beautiful wall in the world, a wall that was not a wall at all but a canvas, a screen, a surface on which the sky could paint its nightly masterpiece of blues and purples and violets, a private showing that only Alina and whoever was standing at her sink could see. Matteo, who was 12, came into the kitchen. He was tall for his age and angular, all elbows and knees, like a puppy that had not yet grown into its paws. He opened the refrigerator, took out a piece of bread, tore off a chunk, and ate it standing up, leaning against the counter, looking at his mother with an expression that was characteristic of 12-year-old boys the world over, an expression that combined love and impatience and curiosity and boredom in equal measure, an expression that said, "I am here, but I am also elsewhere. I am listening, but I am also not listening. I am your son, but I am also my own person. And I am in the process of becoming someone you will not recognize." "What are you looking at?" he said. "The wall," Elena said. He looked at the wall. The wall was blue, just blue. A wall being blue. He shrugged the magnificent, world-weary shrug of the 12-year-old and left the kitchen, taking his bread with him. Elena smiled. She smiled the smile of a mother who knows that her children do not yet see what she sees, who knows that they will see it someday, perhaps, when they are older, when they have lived long enough to have lost things and found things and lost things again, when they have learned, as she had learned, that the most beautiful things in the world are not the things that shout, but the things that whisper, not the things that demand attention, but the things that offer themselves quietly, without fanfare, to anyone who is willing to stop and look and listen. She stirred the soup. The soup bubbled. The wall turned from blue to violet to the deep, dark purple that was the last color before black. And Elena, standing in her tiny kitchen with her wooden spoon and her pot of minestrone and her view of the most beautiful wall in the world, felt something that she had been feeling on and off for the past several months. A sense that something was ending and something else was beginning, that she was in between the life she had lived and the life she would live, in between the woman she had been and the woman she was becoming, in between the doing and the being, in between the noise and the silence. She did not know what the new life would look like. She did not know who the new woman would be. But she knew, with the quiet certainty that comes not from the mind, but from the body, from the bones, from the deep, ancient, pre-verbal part of a person that knows things before the mind catches up. She knew that the blue hour was showing her something, was teaching her something, was preparing her for something, and that all she had to do was watch and wait and trust. The dream shifted one last time. She was 52 again, the age she had been when her father died, the age she had been when the crack appeared in the wall, the age she had been when the 30 seconds of perfect peace had shown her, like a flash of lightning in a dark room, what the room actually looked like. She was in the room where her father had died, the room below her current apartment, the room where she had grown up, where her mother had grown up, where her grandmother had grown up, a room that had witnessed more than a century of births and deaths and meals and arguments and laughter and tears and all the small, ordinary, irreplaceable moments that make up a human life. But in the dream, the room was empty. Her father's bed was gone. The furniture was gone. The room was just a room, 4 walls, a floor, a ceiling, a window. And the window was open, and through the window came the blue hour, flooding into the empty room like water, filling it from floor to ceiling with a blue so deep and so soft and so luminous that the room seemed to exist not in a building, but inside a gemstone, inside a sapphire, inside the heart of something precious and ancient and eternal. Alina stood in the middle of the room and let the blue surround her. She let it touch her face, her hands, her hair. She let it seep into her skin, into her muscles, into her bones. She let it fill her the way water fills a glass, completely, without gaps, without hesitation, taking the exact shape of the vessel it entered. And as the blue filled her, she felt the last of the tension leave, the last of the tension she had been carrying for 52 years. The tension of being alive, the tension of being human, the tension of having a body that could feel pain and a mind that could fear pain and a heart that could break and be mended and break again. All of it left, all of it dissolved in the blue. And what remained was not nothing. It was the opposite of nothing. It was everything. It was the everything that had always been there, beneath the tension and the noise and the motion. The everything that was so simple and so obvious that it was almost impossible to see. The fact of being alive, the fact of being here, the fact of being held in this moment by this light, by this room, by this city, by this life. The dream released her. It let her go the way the blue hour lets go of the sky, gently, gradually, without violence, without interruption, without ceremony. Alina surfaced from the dream the way a swimmer surfaces from deep water slowly, feeling the change in temperature, in pressure, in the quality of light and sound, aware first of the body, and then of the room, and then of the world beyond the room. Each layer of awareness arriving in its own time, like the layers of a sunrise. She was still in the chair. The chair still held her. The room was dark, darker than before, the darkness of deep night, the darkness of 3 or 4 hours past sunset. The window was a rectangle of slightly less dark, through which she could see the faint glow of the street lights, and above them, the black sky with its few bright stars. The air in the room was cool and still and smelled of the night, of jasmine, of stone, of the particular, indefinable scent of Rome at night, which was the scent of 2,000 years of human living compressed into a single breath, the scent of empires and ruins and prayers and feasts and plague and rebirth and all the other things that had happened on this ground, in this air, under this sky. Alina did not move. She lay in the chair and let the dream settle within her. Let let it find its place among her other memories. Let it become part of the vast, intricate, ever-shifting mosaic that was her inner life. She did not try to hold onto the dream. She had learned over these 11 years of practice that holding onto a dream was like trying to hold onto water. The harder you gripped, the more it slipped through your fingers. And the only way to keep it was to open your hands and let it rest in your palm, ungrasped, unclaimed, free to stay or go as it pleased. The dream stayed. At least its essence stayed. Not the details, the courtyard and the well and the laundry and the Spanish steps and the kitchen and the empty room. Those would fade as all dream details faded within minutes or hours, dissolving like the blue hour into the darkness of ordinary forgetting. But the essence, the feeling, the quality, the tone, that would remain, that would sink into her the way water sinks into dry earth, becoming part of the ground, part of the foundation, part of the unseen, unsung, underground support system that held up everything that grew above it. She became aware, gradually, of the sounds of the night. Not the sounds of the blue hour, those were gone now, replaced by the different, deeper, sparser sounds of the deep night. The restaurants were closed, or nearly closed. The voices were gone. The clinking of glasses and silverware was gone. What remained was the night's own music. The low, continuous hum of the city's infrastructure. The distant rumble of a train on the tracks near Trastevere. The subterranean gurgle of water in pipes that ran beneath the streets like veins beneath skin. The occasional groan of a building settling, adjusting, accommodating itself to the temperature change. The way an old person adjusts their position in a chair, shifting a hip, straightening a spine, finding a new equilibrium. And beneath these sounds, beneath the mechanical sounds, the structural sounds, the sounds of the city's body, there was a deeper silence, not the absence of sound, but the presence of something that was not sound, something that was to sound what space is to objects, what the sky is to stars, what the page is to words. This silence was the ground on which all the sounds rested, the background against which they were visible, the silence that had been here before Rome was built, and that would be here long after Rome was gone. The silence of the earth itself, patient, immense, unconcerned with the temporary comings and goings of human beings and their cities and their civilizations. Alina listened to this silence. She listened the way you listen to a piece of music that has no melody, not for notes, but for texture, not for structure, but for presence, not for meaning, but for experience. And as she listened, she felt the silence enter her, felt it fill the spaces between her thoughts, felt it smooth the edges of her mind the way water smooths the edges of a stone. And she understood, not for the first time, but with renewed clarity, with the clarity that comes from having just passed through a dream and being still soft, still permeable, still open, that this silence was not empty. It was full. It was the fullest thing she had ever encountered. It was full of everything that had ever been said, and everything that had ever been unsaid, full of all the words that had been spoken in this city over 2,000 years, and all the words that had been swallowed, held back, hidden in the heart, full of all the laughter and all the weeping and all the prayers and all the curses and all the lullabies and all the love letters and all the goodbye letters and all the letters that were never written and all the letters that were written and torn up and all the letters that were written and sent and lost and all the letters that were written and sent and received and read and wept over and kept in a drawer for 30 years and found again after a death and read again and wept over again. The silence held all of it, every word ever spoken in Rome, every word ever whispered in Rome, every word ever screamed in Rome, every word ever thought in Rome. The silence held them all, not as memories, but as presences, not as ghosts, but as living things, as vibrations that had been set in motion by human voices, and that had traveled through the air and bounced off the stone walls and the marble floors and the terracotta rooftops, and had never stopped traveling, had never dissipated, had simply become part of the silence, part of the texture of the air, part of the invisible, intangible, immeasurable substance that filled the spaces between the buildings and the people and the stars. Alina lay in the chair and let the silence hold her the way the silence held everything else, completely, impartially, without judgment, without preference, without condition. She was one vibration among billions, one voice among the countless voices that had filled this city's air for 2,000 years. One small, temporary, insignificant sound in the vast and ancient symphony of Roman silence. And she was fine with that, more than fine. She was grateful, because to be part of the silence was to be part of something larger than oneself, something that had existed before birth and would exist after death, something that was not diminished by time or changed by circumstance or affected by any of the small, anxious concerns that occupied so much of waking life. She shifted slightly in the chair. The wood creaked. The creak was a sound, and the sound entered the silence and became part of it, and the silence accepted it the way the sea accepts a single drop of rain, without notice, without resistance, without the slightest alteration of its vast, deep, self-sufficient nature. She should go to bed. She knew this. The bed was in the next room. A comfortable bed, a good bed, a bed with a mattress that she had bought 3 years ago from a shop near Campo de Fiori that sold mattresses made by hand by a man named Giuseppe. who claimed to be the last mattress maker in Rome, and who may or may not have been telling the truth, but who made, without question, the most comfortable mattresses Alina had ever slept on. Mattresses that seemed to understand the human body, that seemed to know where the pressure points were and how to relieve them, that seemed to have been designed not by a mattress maker, but by an angel, a sleep angel, a guardian of rest, whose sole mission in the celestial hierarchy was to ensure that the people of Rome slept well. She should go to bed, but she did not go to bed. Not yet. She stayed in the chair because the chair was where she was, and moving from the chair to the bed would require effort, would require decision, would require the re-engagement of the will, and she was not ready for that. She was still in the blue place, the internal blue place, the place that the blue hour had opened within her, and that had stayed open even after the blue hour had ended, like a door that had been left ajar, like a window that had been forgotten open, like a hand that had been extended and not yet withdrawn. The blue place was not a place of sleep, but it was a place that led to sleep, the way a path through a forest leads to a clearing. You did not sleep in the blue place. You passed through it on your way to sleep, and the passing through was its own experience, its own landscape, its own terrain, a terrain that had no map and no guide and no destination, except the one that revealed itself when you arrived at it, which was sleep, which was always sleep, which was the only place the blue place ever led, because the blue place was, in the end, nothing more or less than the corridor between waking and sleeping, the hallway with the soft lighting and the cool floor and the closed doors on either side. And at the end of the hallway, always inevitably, was the door that was not closed but open, and beyond the open door was the dark, and in the dark was sleep, and in sleep was rest, and in rest was renewal, and in renewal was the possibility of another day, blue hour. Another chance to sit by an open window and watch the sky turn blue and let the world slow down and let the mind quiet and let the body rest and let the soul remember what it always forgot during the busy, noisy, demanding hours of the day. That it was alive, that it was here, that it was held, that it was enough. A car passed on the street below. She heard it first as a sound, the low, smooth hum of an engine, the whisper of tires on cobblestones. And then, a moment later, she saw its headlights sweep across the ceiling of her room. Two arcs of white light that moved across the terracotta like searchlights, probing, exploring, illuminating a patch of ceiling that had been dark a moment before and would be dark again a moment later. The light was intrusive briefly, a small violation of the darkness that the room had cultivated so carefully over the past few hours. But it passed quickly. The car moved on. The headlights swept away. The darkness returned. And the darkness, now that it had been briefly interrupted, seemed deeper than before, richer, more textured, like a fabric that has been creased and then smoothed, the crease adding a dimension that was not there before. Alina watched the darkness. She watched it the way she had watched the blue hour, with the same attention, the same openness, the same willingness to be surprised. And the darkness, as though responding to her attention, revealed itself to her, not in a dramatic way. There were no visions, no visitations, no supernatural phenomena. The darkness simply became more present, more vivid, more three-dimensional. It was not flat. It was not uniform. It was a landscape of dark, lighter dark here, darker dark there. Shadows within shadows, depths within depths. A world of darkness that was as complex and as varied and as beautiful as the world of light. A world that most people never saw because they were afraid of the dark, because they had been taught from childhood that the dark was a place of danger and fear, a place where monsters lived, a place to be avoided, to be lit up, to be driven away with lamps and flashlights and the glow of screens. But Alina was not afraid of the dark. She had not been afraid of the dark for many years, not since the blue hour had taught her that darkness was not the opposite of light, but its companion, its partner, its other half, that the two existed in a relationship not of opposition, but of complement. The way breath exists in a relationship with the lungs, not against them, but with them, not negating them, but completing them. The dark was where the light came from. The dark was where the light returned to. The dark was the womb of the blue hour, the soil from which the colors of the evening grew, the canvas on which the streetlights painted their small, golden, necessary masterpieces. She lay in the dark and let it hold her, and the dark held her the way the chair held her, and the room held her, and the building held her, and the city held her, and the silence held her, and the night held her gently, completely, without condition. She was being held by so many things, she realized. She was being held by the physical world and the invisible world and the world of memory and the world of imagination and the world of the senses and the world of the spirit. And all of these worlds were not separate, but were overlapping, interpenetrating, coexisting in the same space at the same time, like the layers of a palimpsest, like the strata of an archaeological dig. And she, Alina, 63 years old, silver-haired, brown-eyed, sitting in a dead man's chair in a 400-year-old building in the Eternal City. She was at the center of all of it, at the intersection of all these worlds. And the intersection was not a point, but a presence, not a location, but an experience, not a thing to be understood, but a mystery to be lived. She thought of the cat on the rooftop, the orange cat with its pale amber fur and its profound, absolute calm. She wondered where the cat was now, probably sleeping. Cats slept 16 hours a day. She had read somewhere 16 hours of sleep nestled between 8 hours of wakefulness, and she had thought, when she read that the cat had the right idea, that the cat had figured out something that humans spent their whole lives trying to figure out, and usually failed to figure out, which was that most of what we do during our waking hours is unnecessary, that we could accomplish in 4 hours what we currently accomplished in 16, and that the remaining 12 hours could be given over to rest, to stillness, to the simple, radical, countercultural act of doing nothing. She wondered if the cat dreamed. She imagined that it did. She imagined the cat dreaming of rooftops and moonlight and the sound of pigeons and the smell of fish from a market stall and the warmth of a chimney pot in the afternoon sun. She imagined the cat's dreams were simple and physical and uncomplicated by the anxieties and abstractions that cluttered human dreams. And she felt, for a moment, a pang of envy, not for the cat's life, which was harder than people thought, which involved cold and hunger and danger, and all the other realities of life on the street, but for the cat's dreams, which were, she imagined, pure experience, pure sensation, pure being, undiluted by the mind's relentless tendency to interpret and analyze and judge and worry. But the envy passed. It passed because envy was a waking emotion, a daylight emotion, an emotion that belonged to the world of comparison and competition and striving. And Alina was no longer in that world. She was in the blue place, which was on the border between worlds. And in the blue place, emotions did not cling. They came and went like clouds, like the clouds she had seen earlier from her window, the clouds that had been pressed together all afternoon and had begun in the cooling air to separate and thin and reveal the sky between them. In the blue place, emotions were whether real, tangible, sometimes dramatic, but ultimately passing, ultimately temporary, ultimately not what the sky was about. sky was about the sky. The self was about the self. And beneath the weather of emotion, beneath the clouds of feeling and thought and memory, there was the sky of awareness itself, vast, open, luminous, unchanged by whatever passed across it. Alina rested in that sky. She let the clouds come and go. She let the emotions arise and dissolve. She let the thoughts appear and disappear. She did not engage with them. She did not push them away. She did not pull them closer. She simply watched them, the way she had watched the blue hour, the way she had watched the couple on the street, the way she had watched the cat on the rooftop, with attention, with openness, with the kind of love that does not ask for anything in return. And slowly, imperceptibly, like the turning of the earth, like the movement of a shadow across a wall, like the fading of the last light of day, the blue place began to deepen. The corridor widened. The doorway drew nearer. The darkness behind the open door became more inviting, more welcoming, more like a home than a void. And Alina, who had been lying in the chair with her eyes half open, let her eyes close completely. And in the darkness behind her closed eyelids, she saw not blackness, but a deep, rich, warm blue. The blue of the blue hour, the blue of the space between waking and sleeping, the blue of the sky over Rome at the most magical moment of the day. And she let the blue carry her. Let it lift her the way a current lifts a leaf. Let it move her gently, inevitably, toward the place where waking ended and sleeping began. And she went willingly, gratefully, the way you go into a warm bath, the way you go into a familiar room, the way you go into the arms of someone who has been waiting for you, who has always been waiting for you, who will always be waiting for you, in the blue, in the dark, in the deep and tender and merciful night. Outside Alina's window, the city of Rome continued its slow, nocturnal breathing. The streets were empty now, or nearly empty. A few last wanderers, a few few insomniacs, a few night shift workers making their way home through the cobblestone corridors. The restaurants were dark. The shop windows were dark. The church facades were dark. Their marble faces turned upward toward the stars like the faces of sleeping giants, serene and massive and unconscious of the small, flickering, temporary lives that passed beneath them. The Tiber moved through the city with its ancient, unhurried rhythm. It had been moving through this city for longer than there had been a city to move through, carrying the water of the Apennines and the rain of the Tyrrhenian Sea and the melted snow of distant mountains, carrying it all past the Palatine Hill and beneath the Pont Sant'Angelo, and past the Vatican and out toward the sea, a journey of patience and persistence that had no beginning and no end, that simply was the way a river simply is, the way a mountain simply is, the way the earth simply is present, steady, unconcerned with the measurements of human time, operating on a clock that made a human lifetime look like a single breath, a single heartbeat, a single drop of water in a current that had been flowing since before the first human footstep was placed on the banks of the Palatine, and that would be flowing long after the last human footprint had faded from the sand. The stone of Rome was quiet now. The stone that had been heated by the day's sun was cool, and the coolness rose from the stone like a breath, like an exhalation, and mixed with the night air, and became part of the texture of the evening, part of the fabric of the dark. The stone had been here for 2,000 years, some of it for longer, much longer. The tufa and the travertine and the pecorino that had been quarried from the hills outside the city and brought here on carts and on the backs of oxen and on the shoulders of slaves, and set in place by hands that had been dust for centuries, hands that had belonged to men whose names were forgotten, whose faces were forgotten, whose lives were forgotten, but whose work remained, whose stone remained, whose walls and columns and arches and aqueducts remained, silent witnesses to the passing of time, patient custodians of a beauty that they had not created, but that they held, that they supported, that they made possible simply by being there, by being solid, by being strong, by being stone. And the trees, the great stone pines of Rome, with their parasol canopies and their ancient, gnarled trunks. They were quiet too, but their quiet was different from the quiet of the stone. The stone's quiet was the quiet of death, or at least of the inanimate. The tree's quiet was the quiet of life, not the noisy, active, visible life of the daytime, but the quiet, invisible, metabolic life of the night, when the trees did their essential work of breathing, taking in carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen, performing the miracle of photosynthesis in the dark, the miracle that no human technology had ever been able to replicate, the miracle that sustained every breath that every human being had ever taken in this city, in this country, on this planet, without anyone noticing, without anyone thanking them, without anyone except the occasional insomniac or the occasional dreamer sitting by a window in the blue hour, even being aware that the trees were there at all, doing what they had always done, giving what they had always given, asking nothing, receiving nothing, simply being trees, simply being alive, simply being part of the great, intricate, incomprehensibly complex web of life that connected the pine tree outside Alina's window to the algae, in the sea to the grass, in the countryside to the breath in Alina's lungs, in a single, unbroken chain of giving and receiving that had been unbroken for 3 billion years. And that would, if the trees had anything to say about it, which they didn't, because trees don't say things. They simply are continue unbroken for 3 billion more. Somewhere in the city, a baby cried. The cry was thin and high, and it rose up through the night air like a thread of silver, like a wire of sound, and it was answered not by another cry, but by a silence, a brief silence that followed the cry, and that was, in its own way, a response, a recognition, an acknowledgement of the baby's presence in the world, of its newness, its vulnerability, its small, fierce, uncompromising claim on life. And then the silence was filled again by the night's sounds, the hum, the gurgle, the occasional groan, and the baby's cry was gone, absorbed into the texture of the dark, become part of the silence that held everything. And somewhere a mother held a baby and rocked it and whispered to it in the ancient, universal language of mothers and bobbies, a language that had no words, but that communicated everything: safety, warmth, love, presence, the simple, essential, life-sustaining message that said, "I am here. You are not alone. Sleep now. I will hold you while you sleep. I will hold you until you wake. I will hold you always, or at least for as long as you need me to, which is, for now, forever." Somewhere else in the city, an old man sat on the edge of his bed and put on his shoes. He was 81 years old, and he could not sleep, had not been able to sleep for more than 3 hours at a stretch since his wife had died 2 years ago, and he had given up trying. Instead, he got up in the middle of the night and put on his shoes and walked. He walked through the dark streets of his neighborhood, the Centro Storico, the old heart of Rome, where he had lived his entire life. And he walked slowly, with a cane, stopping frequently to rest, to look at things, to remember. He stopped at a fountain that he had looked at every day of his life, and that still, after 81 years, surprised him with its beauty. He stopped at a church that he had entered 1,000 times, and that still, after 1,000 entries, filled him with a sense of awe that he could not explain and did not try to. He stopped at a window, a particular window, on a particular street, on a particular floor, and looked at it for a long time, the window was dark, and the window held no one, and the window was just a window. But to the old man it was a door that opened not onto the room behind it, but onto the past, onto the time when the window had been lit, and the room behind it had been full of life and love and laughter, and all the other things that filled rooms when they were young, and that emptied out of them slowly over the years, like water from a vessel with a crack in it, until one day the room was empty and the window was dark, and the only thing left was the looking, the standing on the street in the middle of the night, looking up at a dark window and remembering when it was light. The old man did not know Alina. He did not know that 3 streets away, in a building on a street off the Via dei Coronari, a woman was sleeping in a wooden chair, dreaming of blue walls and courtyards and the smell of clean laundry. He did not know that they were both awake, or nearly awake, or in the borderland between waking and sleeping, at the same time, in the same city, under the same sky, breathing the same air. He did not know that they were both, in their different ways, doing the same thing, moving through the dark hours with the slow, careful, attentive grace of people who understood that the night was not a void to be filled, but a space to be inhabited, not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived, not an enemy to be fought, but a companion to be embraced. But they were both doing the same thing, and they were not alone. All across Rome, all across Italy, all across Europe, all across the world, there were people who were awake in the deep night, people who could not sleep or who had chosen not to sleep, people who were sitting by windows or walking through streets or lying in beds with their eyes open, people who were moving through the darkness with their own particular rhythms and their own particular reasons and their own particular ways of being in the world, and all of them, the insomniacs and the dreamers and the night shift workers and the old men with their canes and the young mothers with their crying bobbies, and the women sleeping in wooden chairs. All of them were connected, whether they knew it or not, by the simple, stubborn, unbreakable thread of being alive at the same time on the same planet under the same sky, connected by the darkness that held them all, the silence that held them all, the night that held them all in its vast, indifferent, infinitely tender embrace. The night held Rome. The night held Alina. The night held the old man with his cane, and the baby with its cry, and the cat on its rooftop, and the stone pines with their silent breathing, and the Tiber with its ancient flowing, and the domes, and the rooftops, and the cobblestones, and the streetlights, and the stars, and the silence, and the dark, and the blue that was gone now from the sky, but that lived on in the space behind closed eyes, in the space between waking and sleeping, in the space between the breath going out and the breath coming in the space that was not a space at all, but a presence, a feeling, a state of being that had no name in any language that Alina knew, but that she recognized every time she entered it. The way you recognize a face that you have seen 1,000 times, but cannot quite place. The way you recognize a song that you heard in childhood and have not heard since, but that, when it plays, fills you with an emotion that is larger than the song itself, an emotion that is not about the song, but about the time, the place, the person you were when you first heard it, the person you thought you had lost, but who turns out in the blue place, in the dark place, in the place between waking and sleeping, to have been here all along, waiting for you, patient and still and unchanging, like the stone of Rome, like the sky over Rome, like the blue hour itself. Always here, always returning, always ready to receive you if you are willing to sit still long enough, to breathe slowly enough, to let go enough, to be here now, in this moment that will never come again, in this breath that will never be breathed again, in this life that will never be lived again, and to know, not with the mind, but with the body, not with the intellect, is enough, that this is more than enough, that this is everything. The night deepens, the city sleeps, the stone cools, the river flows, the stars turn slowly in their ancient courses, and somewhere in Rome, in a chair by a window, a woman breathes in and breathes out,